but it actually only pits them against each other in a kind of zero-sum competition in which they usually tear each other down. When I consider the 7 women I chose, I see that most of them were great for reasons that derive precisely from their being women, not in spite of it. And what made them great has nothing to do with their being measured against or competing with men. In other words, their accomplishments are not gender neutral, but are rooted in their singularity as women. All of them existed and thrived as women, and stand quite apart from anything touching the kind of thinking I encountered. The first woman I chose, Joan of Arc, is a good example. She is sometimes thought of as great because she did what men do. She donned armor and became a warrior. But that is far off the mark. Joan of Arc was no fierce Amazon. Far from it. There was nothing even slightly manly about her. On the contrary, it was her youth, innocence, purity, and holiness that made it possible for her to do what she did. Only just past girlhood, she was deeply affected by the suffering she saw in the battles around her, never becoming inured to the carnage and agonies of war as a male soldier typically will do. It was precisely her vulnerability and womanly virtue that stunned and inspired the rough soldiers in a way that no man ever could do. It was because of these qualities that they were in awe of her and respected her. Though her spirit was as large as anyone's who has ever lived, she herself was neither big nor strong. In other words, there could never be a male Joan of Arc. The very idea is a laughable oxymoron. Similarly, Rosa Parks was specifically chosen to do what she did because she was a woman. Those who wanted to make a federal case out of her arrest knew they must have the right person, and they knew it must be a woman. Her feminine dignity was vital to the case, so there never could have been a male Rosa Parks. Obviously, Susanna Wesley, who bore 19 children and raised the surviving 10, could not have been a man, and Saint Maria of Paris wanted to be a mother to all she encountered and positively exuded motherhood. Hannah More was considered a model of femininity by those who knew her, and because of this, she was especially valued and respected by the many men whom she called friends. She was nothing like their male friends, and so the cultural influence she wielded was not a result of her being one of the boys. Quite the contrary. Corrie ten Boom exudes an unmistakably feminine warmth, and who can doubt that it was Mother Teresa's femaleness that flummoxed and disarmed and charmed those with whom she dealt? Can we as easily imagine a man doing what she did? So the stories of these great women show us that men and women are not interchangeable. There are things men can and should do that women cannot, and there are things that women can and should do that men cannot. So comparing men and women is something like comparing apples and oranges, except apples and oranges are actually far more like each other than are men and women. Apples and oranges can exist without each other, but men and women cannot. Men and women were deliberately designed to be different. Indeed, we are specifically created as complements to each other, as different halves of a whole, and that whole reflects the glory of God. It's patently obvious that we were physically created to fit together, and of course, if that weren't the case, we could not create life. So when men cease to be such, or when women deny their uniqueness, they make that complementarity impossible, and the whole, as it were, suffers. There's much to be said on that subject, but the point to make here is that we are meant to be different, and God wants us to celebrate and rejoice in our differences, never to suppress them or denigrate them. I'm privileged to be friends with someone whose husband was born in 1889. For context, that's the year Vincent van Gogh painted Starry Night, Jefferson Davis died, and Adolf Hitler was born. Alice von Hildebrand, her friends call her Lily, is a delight. So much so that I've now twice had her as my guest at Socrates in the City, a forum that encourages busy and successful professionals in thinking about the bigger questions in life. Her age, 91 as I write this, gives her a great measure of authority, but it hasn't dimmed her fire even slightly. It would not be inaccurate to describe her as a pistol.